A stressful situation that I currently was involved in was a situation where I actually had two soldiers underage drink in a barracks building with two other soldiers who were of age. So I am currently in processing liaison here. So this was a big deal because the soldiers are not supposed to be drinking underage here in Korea. And it actually was a situation that escalated quite quickly. When I walked into my soldier's room, I asked, what had happened, and pretty much what happened was this soldier had been vaping and they blew smoke out the window, which in turn turned the fire alarm off in the building. And I went in there and I said, okay, there's 4 of you guys in here, tell me what's going on and explain to me how this happened. So pretty much the lesson of the story is these soldiers were underage drinking, they had been vaping, and the fire alarm went off. It was a very stressful situation because there were NCOs running around trying to figure out what had happened. And I took this situation underneath my belt and I said, you know what, guys, we're going to go in this other room and we're going to talk about what happened. I want to know detail for detail what happened. Everyone else was running around very chaotic and they weren't really sure what had happened, but I wanted to make sure that I took account every single detail of these soldiers' occurrence that had just happened. So it was a very stressful situation, being that there were people involved that weren't acting the way they should have, and they weren't taking the pressure the right way, and they were just kind of exaggerating and making the situation worse than what it really was, where I just stepped aside and I just wanted to know each soldier's individual issues and what had happened and each detail of the situation. So I took a stressful situation and I tried to calm it down, tried to find the right answers of what had happened, and I really just wanted to hear out each soldier's story. That way I could write it all out for the incident report. And that was definitely a situation that was stressful, but I kept calm and I wrote down everything I needed to, and the soldiers are currently still being under investigation, but during a level of high stress, I decided, I'm not going to allow this to get to me. I'm just going to be calm and level-headed and approach the situation in the best way I could. So that's how I handled it. A situation I have encountered since I've been in the military recently that I had to go above and beyond to get the job done was taking over a battalions and processing program. So I arrived in Korea and kind of just got thrown into this job, and I restructured the program and I've remapped out the requirements for each soldier that needs to come through here to successfully complete in processing. The program before was a little bit outdated and things weren't as they should have been as far as scheduling and the way things were done. There was a lot of empty space and a lot of days where we weren't doing much. So that was definitely a situation where I had to go above and beyond to allow the program to become better and to become more sufficient. I've allowed these soldiers to do Sharp 360 training, CLS, driver's training, TMP testing, medical and dental, along with CQ training, 8th Army Blue Book training, and I do room inspections and PT on a daily basis. So I've definitely turned this program around and made it a 3-week program instead of a 2-week program. But with the 2-week program, with the 3-week program, we're now implementing driver's training. And these soldiers are leaving here with all of their 350-1 training done and the majority of their requirements, whether it's if they want to join college or if they want to, get their passports to travel while they're out here in Korea. I've definitely tried to alter this program to better the soldiers as a whole here that come to Korea. So as a leader in my last organization, I would have changed the amount of time management that was taking place, because things would get put out throughout the day. We'd find out what we needed to get done, but then by the end of the day, of course, there were multiple things that were added on top of what we already were told to do. So I think that time management could have been kept up a little bit better in my last unit. Instead of soldiers staying till 1900 to get something done, they were aware of the fact that it needed to be done earlier on in the day. That way it could have gotten accomplished at an early time, so that these soldiers could have gotten released at 1700 instead of getting late meeting up with their wives and husbands, them being frustrated, and just knowing the overall mission early on in the morning. That way we know our hit times. That way when we hit that 1700, everything's done, everything's complete. Time management was definitely something that could have been improved at my last unit. Something that I did to improve my last organization was I was an education advisor. So I worked hand in hand with University of Maryland, and I would basically find people who wanted to join college while they're in the Army. And a lot of times this seems just unrealistic for soldiers, but I just harped on education, and I harped on these soldiers that they needed to pursue their goals educationally wise, like outside of the Army, because the Army can't always get to where you want to be in life. If you get out, you know, you have to have education to back up what you've done in the military. So I definitely stressed education. I was able to enroll 10 to 15 soldiers into University of Maryland so they could start their online courses. So one of them actually got their associate's degree after this, and I've always been like a mentor when it comes to education. So I definitely bettered the unit as a whole, getting them more involved in their education. So the best traits of an officer that I've ever been around in the workforce was an officer who actually was a prior E7. So he had been through a lot. He was prior infantry, but crossing over to the officer side for him was a breeze because, one, he knew how hard we work as NCOs. He knew that without NCOs in the picture, nothing would basically get done. So he was in that perfect area where he knew what we had gone through and what we go through on a daily basis, and then he knew his role as an officer. So he knew where not to cross the boundary of an NCO and an officer. He was one of those that just led by example. He was out there doing PT with us every morning. He didn't just pull the officer card and say, hey, I'm just going to go do PT on my own. He gave advice on a daily basis to all of us to just better our careers overall. He always was out in the motor pool, side by side, you know, looking at us, seeing what we were doing, making sure we were getting everything done, and he was out there motivating us constantly. So the worst officer I've ever encountered was someone the complete opposite, who never did PT, who stayed in the office all the time, put his feet up on the desk, just didn't really put much energy into his career at all. He would just go there, that 9 to 5, check the dot, do his PowerPoint slides, and call it a day. And that's something that a lot of officers, I feel like, get stuck into eventually over time. But it's really about like getting out of your comfort zone and not necessarily being best friends with your soldiers, but being next to them and seeing what they're doing on a daily basis is definitely important to having their trust, and leading by example is something that's very important from an officer. The most influential person in my life, hands down, is my sister. She is 45 years old, and she is a full-time mom and pastor. She lives in Australia and has two children, and she actually has traveled the entire United States as a pastor in a bus with her and her husband. They were pastors, and they lived off of the Lord, and they pursued their passions as pastors. They traveled and they met people along the way. They always were willing to take the shirts off their back for somebody. They always were trying to be servants of the Lord, and that's something that I just fathom, and I just can't fathom just traveling in a van for about a year long, just giving your life away to ministry and traveling and not living comfortably and not having a house and giving up possessions in order to travel and accomplish and speak the word of God to people. And that's something that I've admired my entire life, and I admire her as a wife. I admire her for the things she's done for her children and for her husband, and her faith and just overall presence as a person. She's just someone that I look up to on a day-to-day basis. I can go to her for anything. She gives the best advice, and she's always willing to take the time to talk to me about issues I'm having or just about life in general. I know that she's someone that I can go to for anything. And that person is my sister Dina, and she's someone that I will always look up to, and she definitely is the most influential leader in my life.